Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajakacharya Ashtotar Tadashri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Oh, sorry. Sorry, just have to get this verse. Okay. Okay. Narayanam namaskritya narang chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiriet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, and to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta prayesha badreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya Bhagavatyuttama shloke Bhakti bhavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil. And loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 17th day of September 2025 in San Diego, Holy Ekadashi Day, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we'll be reading from Canto 8, Withdrawal of the Cosmic Creations, Chapter 22, Bali Mahārāja surrenders his life, text 28 through 30. Okay, we'll chant text 29. But we'll begin with text 28. I'll read the Sanskrit myself. Esha dhanava daityanam agrani kirti vardhanaha ajaishid ajayam mayam sidan api namuhyati. Bali Mahārāja has become the most famous among the demons and non-believers, for in spite of being bereft of all material opulences, he is fixed in his devotional service. And this is Vamanadev himself speaking, I believe. Yes, answering Brahma's doubts. Purport. In this verse, the words Sidan api namuhyati are very important. A devotee is sometimes put into adversity while executing devotional service. In adversity, everyone laments and becomes aggrieved. But by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, a devotee, even in the worst condition, can understand that he is going through a severe examination by the Personality of Godhead. Bali Mahārāja passed all such examinations as explained in the following verses. Okay, so now we'll read text 29. All right. Chena Raktash Chutaha Stanat Chipto Badhash Chashatrubhihi Gyatibish Cha Parityakto Yatanam Anuyapitaha Chinariktash Chutak Stanat Chipto Badhas Chashatrubhihi Gyatibish Chaparityakto Yatanam Anuyapitaha Chinariktas Chutak Stanat Chipto Badhas Chashatrubhihi Gyatibish Chaparityakto Yatanam Anuyapitaha Chinariktas Chutak Stanat Chipto Badhas Chashatrubhihi Gyatibish Chaparityakto Yatanam Anuyapitaha Chinariktas Chutak Stanat Chipto Badhas Chashatrubhihi Gyatibish Chaparityakto Yatanam Anuyapitaha Chinariktas Chutak Stanat Chipto Badhas Chashatrubhihi Gyatibish Chaparityakto Yatanam Anuyapitaha Chinariktas Chutak Stanat Chipto Badhas Chashatrubhihi Gyatibish Chaparityakto Yatanam Anuyapitaha Chinariktas Chutak Stanat Chipto Badhas Chashatrubhihi Gyatibish Chaparityakto Yatanam Anuyapitaha. Come on, Naveen, you can do it. Oh, 1 second. Go ahead. Chinariktas Chutak Stanat Chipto Badhas Chashatrubhihi Gyatibish Chaparityakto Yatanam Anuyapitaha. Chad, go ahead. Chinariktaschutak stanat. Chipto badhascha shatrubihi. Gyatibis. Gyatibis. Okay. Too late. Ladies? Chinariktaschutak stanat. Chipto badhascha shatrubihi. Yatibhischa parityakto. Yatanam anuyapitaha. Okay. No? All right. Anyone online?
Kshinariktas Chutastanat
Chinariktas chutakstanat.
Kshipto Badash Shashatrubihi
Shipto badhas chashatrubi.
Gyatibhischa Parityakto
Yatibhischa parityakto.
Chatanama Nuyapitaha.
Yatanam anuyapitaha. Okay, well, I'll just read that. Chinariktaha, although bereft of all riches. Chutaha, fallen. Stanat, from his superior position. Chiptaha, forcefully thrown away. Badhaha cha, and forcefully bound. Shatrubihi, by his enemies. Gyatibhicha, and by his family members or relatives. Parityaktaha, deserted. Yatanam, all kinds of suffering. Anuyapitaha. Okay, then there's another verse here. I'll just read the translation of both of them. Although bereft of his riches. Now this is Vamanadev, I think, speaking to Brahma and everyone else. Although bereft of his riches, fallen from his original position, defeated and arrested by his enemies, rebuked and deserted by his relatives and friends, although suffering the pain of being bound, and although rebuked and cursed by his spiritual master, Bali Mahārāja, being fixed in his vow, did not give up his truthfulness. It was certainly with pretension that I spoke about religious principles, but he did not give up religious principles, for he is true to his word. Purport. Bali Mahārāja passed the severe test put before him by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is further proof of the Lord's mercy toward his devotee. The Supreme Personality of Godhead sometimes puts a devotee to severe tests that are almost unbearable. One could hardly even live under the conditions forced upon Bali Mahārāja. That Bali Mahārāja endured all these severe tests and austerities is the mercy of the Supreme Lord. The Lord certainly appreciates the devotee's forbearance, and it is recorded for the future glorification of the devotee. This was not an ordinary test. As described in this verse, hardly anyone could survive such a test. But for the future glorification of Bali Mahārāja, one of the mahājanas, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Personality of Godhead not only tested him, but also gave him the strength to tolerate such adversity. The Lord is so kind to his devotee that when severely testing him, the Lord gives him the necessary strength to be tolerant and continue to remain a glorious devotee. Give me 1 second. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Sri Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So there's one verse that's very pertinent to this, and that's quite famous, and I'm going to share that one with you. This is spoken by Lord Brahma himself in his prayers to Lord Krishna in chapter 14 of the 10th canto. That's after the Brahma Vimohan Leela, where Brahma becomes bewildered because Krishna is just, he expanded himself into an equal number of boys and calves and continued to play for a whole year of our time, only a moment of Brahma's time. And so Brahma came down after that and offered these prayers, and they're very important, and this one is perhaps the most famous. Tatte nukampam sutamikshemano bunjana evad nakritam vipakam ridvag vapurbe vidadan namaste jiveti yo mukti bade sadayabak. This is just describing exactly what Bali has done. My dear Lord, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy upon him, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds and offering you respectful obeisances with his heart, words, and body, is surely eligible for liberation, for it has become his rightful claim. Okay. I'm just going to read the last paragraph of this nice purport here. A sincere devotee earnestly desires to go back to the Lord's abode. Therefore, he willingly accepts the Lord's merciful punishment and continues offering respects and obeisances to the Lord with his heart, words, and body. Such a bona fide servant of the Lord, considering all hardship a small price to pay for gaining the personal association of the Lord, certainly becomes a legitimate son of God, as indicated here by the words Dayabak. Just as one cannot approach the sun without becoming fire, one cannot approach the Supreme Pure, Lord Krishna, without undergoing a rigid purificatory process, which may appear like suffering, but which is in fact a curative treatment administered by the personal hand of the Lord. So the word Dayabak, I think it's there in the translation. It's applied to, say, a son, or today a daughter, who was due to get an inheritance from a wealthy parent, say his father, you know. All that person has to do is stay alive and maintain the favorable relationship with that person. And so despite all difficulties, this is what it's said here, that you earn the right to go back to Godhead by tolerating any sufferings that may be undergone along the way. And sometimes it's like, you know, because someone may have this attitude. And this is something that Prabhupada mentioned about the ladies in Germany during the war. Near the end of the war, all the men were being dragooned, or say drafted into the army, even old men. It was crazy, but that's what Hitler was doing. And many of them would die and become severely injured or whatever. So these ladies were very devout Lutherans, probably, and they would go to church, you know, every Sunday or even more often, and pray very ardently to God to please return my son, my husband, my father, whatever it may be. And the vast majority of them didn't come back. They certainly didn't come back healthy. If they came back, they were severely injured, and it was just a horrible situation. And many of these ladies lost their faith. They weren't following this principle because they weren't trained, and they weren't, you see. So this is what it means to surrender to Krishna, to God, is that it means that, okay, I'm going to do, I now will try to perform the services as instructed by my spiritual master and the Shastra, and in the course of doing that, there may be some difficulties that arise. I may get ill. There may be suddenly a depression or a big recession in society, and there's no money to go around, so we're struck by poverty, even more than usual, and all kinds of difficulty. That's what it just means to be in the material world. And so the attitude that a pure devotee or sincere devotee says, well, this is reactions to my previous activities, but I'm just getting a taste of it. It could have been much worse, but Krishna's giving me a little punishment. He's so kind, you see. And of course, in the course of life, some things happen, they're very favorable. Suddenly, you know, who knows, some big donation comes in and we can increase the worship of the Lord, you know, whatever. And so this is also seen as Krishna's mercy. He's giving us a chance to serve him that much better, you see. So you can see in either case, whether something negative happens or something positive happens, you see it as Krishna's hand is there, and on one side he's minimizing the bad things that happen because I'm his devotee, but it must have been really horrible what I did in my past life. I'm just getting a touch. And on the other hand, he's giving us some good thing to give us more facility for service. So in both cases, your positive attitude toward the Lord and your faith in the Lord is increased. And therefore, you've bought a ticket to Goloka. This is more or less what he's saying here. So back to Bali Mahārāja. Now, you can see the extreme example that he sets here. He in his role as the king of the demons, he had led them against the demigods, and they won. And they were occupying the heavenly planets, and the demigods were all exiled. And of course, we know from the last chapter, chapter before it, the mother of the demigods, Aditi, became very upset, and she approached her husband, and please give me some sacrifice or something I can do. I think it's Kashyapa. So that we can get the Lord's mercy, and we can, this situation can be relieved. So he gave her the instruction for the Payo Vrata. Who remembers what Payo Vrata means? The vow to drink milk only every day, 12 days, I think, and say there's so many prayers and things attended also. So she did it very strictly, and what happened? Narayan appears, right? And he says, "Don't worry, I'm going to appear as your son." I mean, something like that. And so he appears as Vamanadev, who's not a Brahmin dwarf. Everyone didn't hear this before. You look up dwarf in the English dictionary, and you know what you're going to find? Someone who's diminutive and disfigured out of some disease. Yes, that's a dwarf in English, modern English. Now, in the Oxford English Dictionary, there's also an adjective dwarf, I think even in the modern American dictionary, which means simply diminutive, you see? And that's what he is. So he's not a Brahmin dwarf, he's a dwarf Brahmin. You get the difference? Dwarf as an adjective. Anyway. So that's his aspect. And so there were all these sages, and everyone came, demigods came to give him all kinds of gifts, if you recall. And just suitable for a little Brahman. And so then in that role, he then approached the heavenly planet that Bali was occupying, and he was performing a huge sacrifice. I'm just trying to summarize the plot until now. And he very effulgent, he was walking, and he had all the paraphernalia. And Bali was very deferential to the Brahmins. So this is a very beautiful Brahmin, and he offered him to give him any charity. Meanwhile, Shukracharya, his guru, saw that this is God himself, and so he went, don't promise him anything. Actually, Bali had already promised the 3 steps of land. So Shukracharya told him to break the promise. He didn't break the promise because it's actually God, and he's going to take everything. You could see that, So Bali was unwilling to break the promise. And he even rejected Shukracharya. He said, "Oh, he's God, and you want me not to give him, charity? I reject you." Even though he's, in the position of a demon, the head of the demons. He's a descendant of Prahlad. Prahlad was born as the son of Hiranyakashipu. So, what happens is that he offers him anything. He says, "You want an island, meaning a planet? The island, the planets floating in the sky are known as dweepas. This is Jambu Dweep we're sitting on here, officially according to the 5th canon. It means like it's an island in the ocean of space. So he says, I can offer you a planet, and you're just asking for 3 steps of land." You see? So Bali, so Vaman in the role of this Brahmin, he says, a Brahmin should be satisfied with whatever he can get very simply, So he insists, no, just 3 steps of land. Meanwhile, Shukracharya is freaking out because he understands that he's going to take everything. And Shukracharya is saying, well, if he gets everything, then where's my salary? Because I'm dependent on Bali for my sustenance. So Bali, the first installment of his surrender is that he rejects Shukracharya. He rejects his spiritual master. He said, no, I promised these 3 steps of land. There's no way I can break my promise. So he just rejected his spiritual master. So his spiritual master is all upset. He curses him. You're going to lose everything, like that. So then it comes time, and so now Vamana Deva insists, no, I just need 3 steps of land. I don't need a big planet or anything. So he says, okay, you can have 3 steps. So then, suddenly, you all know the story. Vamana Deva expands, just like Krishna showed. The analogy is there in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the universal form. And with 1 step, he covers the whole Earth planet, or whatever planet there are, the heavenly planet. With the 2nd step, he covers the rest of the universe and pierces through the covering of the universe. The universe is covered by this earth, water, fire, ether. And the water of the causal ocean leaks through and washes his feet. And then the water continues coming, and that water becomes the Ganges. It flows all the way down. Actually, there's a chapter in the 5th canto that is called The Descent of the Ganges, where the demigods are all carrying in their airplanes, 100 gallons of the Ganges, and they're transporting down to Earth. And there's this question, well, my God, it's going to now be released and hit Earth with such power. So Shiva says, don't worry, I'll take it on my head. And that's why it all comes down in his head, and he's always portrayed with the water on his head in the middle there. So meanwhile, what happens to Bali? He said it was a surprise to him, But so that's 2 steps. What about the 3rd step? That's what this chapter is about. What happens to the 3rd step? And so Bali will say in the next verse, I think, or the next couple of verses, because Vamana say, where do I put my 3rd step? You have to keep the promise, right? Says, okay, you put the 3rd step on my head. In other words, he surrenders fully 100%. And with that, he became Bali Mahārāja, one of the 12 mahājanas. There were 12 authorities in devotional service, and he's one of them. I won't go through the whole list, but Narada is there, and Swayambhuva Manu, and the 4 Kumaras, and Prahlad Maharaj himself, and Bali is there as an exemplar of surrendering everything to the Lord. Atma Nivedanam. That's the last of the 9 processes of devotional service. So the Prabhupada is saying here. Now, I just wanted to refer to Prabhupada's own experience. There's a verse in the 10th canto where Krishna is speaking to Yudhishthira, I believe, and what he says in the Yasyaham Nagunnami Harashe Taddanang Shanai, which means, to those who I show my real mercy, I take away all their possessions. Because material possessions are often the big barrier to surrendering to God. Yes, I'll worship God, everything. But I'll give it my tithe, and everything. But these $100,000 or $100 million, that's mine, for me and my descendants, like that. So, Isha Vashamidam Sarvam, those who know the first verse, the first mantra of the Isha Upanishad, everything belongs to God. Isha Vashamidam, the owner and control of everything. We are entitled to our quota for maintenance, you see, but we have to recognize that everything belongs to God. And that's the mood in which pure bhakti is engaged in. Everything, including my senses, my mind, whatever skills I have, that's all Krishna's. How can it be used in his service? You see, and that's what qualifies one to go back to Godhead, because you don't have any latent desires that you're still cultivating, material desires. So that's part of that in Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Samana Sindhu. That's one of the first verses. Anasakta se vishayan yataham upayunjata nirbandha krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagya muchate. This idea of yukta vairagya, very important. Yukta vairagya means detachment. Raga is one of the words that means attachment. Of course, we want that with Krishna. That's why we're raga anuga. We want to, But now the attachments are all in the material sphere. So here it says, vairagya means with no attachment to material things. But the yukta part means engaging everything in Krishna's service. And so this verse says, anasakta, without attachment, vishayan, to the object of the senses. Vishayan yataham bhuyunjita, engaging them where appropriate in the service of the Lord. You see, Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe. Then you're not bound by your attachment to these things. Rather, you become bound to Krishna, to attachment to Krishna. The raga is going to be there. But now it's all, beginning with our body and our relatives and all the things we find dear. And the other side of that is aversion. All those things that we know will cause us pain and everything. So the itcha and the dvesha have to be transcended. Krishna says in the 7th chapter, itcha dvesha samutena dvandva mohena bharata. Being free from the itcha and the dvesha, the desire to enjoy in this world and the aversion to things that prevent our enjoyment. Prabhupada quotes this verse as proof of how we came to the material world. We fell from the spiritual world. So it's worth knowing. So itcha and dvesha. Itcha means desiring to enjoy the things of this world. Dvesha means aversion to serving Krishna. That's the basic attitude of everyone on this planet, everyone in the material world. Somewhere along the way, they gave up that desire to serve Krishna, and they became averse to Krishna, and we tried to enjoy the things of this world. So, it should be samutena dvandva mohena bharata. Dvandva mohena bharata. Then become bewildered by the dualities of this world. What's pleasing, what's not pleasing to me. The dualities of my body. Sarva bhutani sammoham sargayanti parantada. All living beings here, human beings and all the other living entities, have gone through this. Sarva bhutani sammoham, completely bewildered. Sargayanti parantapa. Sarge can mean the creation. Yanti went to the creation. Yanti parantapa. He's addressing Arjuna as the conqueror of the enemies. So, how to get free from that? Oh, well, yesham tundagatam papam jananam punya karmanam. We have to get free from that duality and then surrender to Krishna. So you can look at the end. The last few verses of the 7th chapter describes it. So back to Bali now. So Bali, as Prabhupada describes here, Bali passed a severe test put before him by the Supreme Lord. And I read this amazing conversation. I've never seen it before. They interviewed the captain of the ship, of the Jaladuta, that I think years later, interviewed him about the passage, and he remembered so many details about Prabhupada coming, And here's something that I never heard before, and you probably never did either. As you probably know, if you read the Lilamrita, you just hear how, the story. Prabhupada underwent, real austerities and difficulties on that trip. A lot of seasickness, and he even felt that he had had 2 heart attacks. And so, as they proceeded from Calcutta through the Suez Canal, and all that, they stopped along the way at certain places. And Prabhupada could get off and walk around. That was very important, But it was still a very difficult passage. And so the captain was saying, well, we're going to come to Egypt soon, and we can get off at Cairo. We can see that big, famous city. And Prabhupada said, something like, all right, I'll get off, but then I'm going to get a ship back. I can't continue on the thing. He had felt so many difficulties in his health and everything like that. And I'd never heard that before, that he was ready to turn back from all of the suffering that was going on. He felt it was too much. But Krishna, by the time he got to Cairo, he was doing a little better. He was feeling better. So he decided not to turn back. But he also didn't go into Cairo. He just stayed on the ship. And eventually, of course, he crossed the Atlantic Ocean. Now, the way Prabhupada described it in his Jaladuta diary, which is fascinating, that he had 2 heart attacks, and he prayed to Krishna, if I have a third one, I'm gone. I'll die. So Krishna appeared to him in a dream. And he said, don't worry. I'll take charge of the ship now, And as they started that journey across the Atlantic Ocean to Boston, if you look at the map, you'll see, from Europe, it's usually very rough seas. At that time of year, it's hurricane season, August, September. That's when Prabhupada traveled. And but that particular year, it was very quiet, just like a lake, And so Prabhupada felt he could continue on, So Krishna took charge, and interestingly, the captain had his wife with him, on the ship. And when she joked, when they got to Boston, said, "Swami, can you please come back with us? We've never had such a smooth, ride across the Atlantic Ocean." So it's difficult. And Prabhupada also, he identified with this other verse that I chanted from Krishna speaking to Yudhishthira, that when I show a lot of mercy, I take everything away from my devotees. Because as you may remember, if you read the Lilamrita, Srila Prabhupada, he was initiated by Bhaktisiddhanta, but he was already a householder. He had several kids by the initiation time. That was quite a bit after he met him. And he had this business and was going on, So he was serving as best he could. He was accommodating the sannyasis of the Gaudiya Math in Bombay, then especially in Allahabad. He lived there for 13 years. But he was writing. He was writing back to God in English and doing all these things. But the idea of sannyas frightened him. As he said that he thought it was horrible. But his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta, kept coming to him in a dream, this time, and asked him, "Follow me," which means follow me in the line of complete renunciation, And after some time, Krishna took away the whole business. So there was a big theft, and Prabhupada wasn't giving the attention to it. He was traveling and doing all these other things. His sons were doing it. And so the business wasn't prospering. And then the final clincher was his marriage was kind of souring. His wife was, insisting on drinking tea, and she sold his Bhagavatam for tea biscuits. And so Prabhupada said, "It's either tea or me." And she thought he was joking, and she said, "I think I'll take the tea." And so he left. And she said, "Well, he's been leaving and coming back for years, but he left. He didn't come back this time." He didn't take sannyas at that time right away, but he was vanaprastha, and that was the first step. And eventually, at the urging of his spiritual master and his godbrothers, he took sannyas, I think, in 59, if I'm not mistaken. So it was like that. And Prabhupada's writing this. Prabhupada's passed the severe test put by him by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Bali passed it, and Prabhupada passed it, and he became empowered, as to preach and to be. He says several times, many times in his book, he says he would call it a transparent via media, Via media is not exactly the right word. Via media means a street or a road that goes from one place to another. But he meant a transparent medium, a medium by which he could give the teachings, teach by example, and inspire others in the Western world to renounce sense gratification. But he had great faith, as he explained to. In the song, that Markandeya Bhagavat Dharma song, which Niranjana read on Sunday night as inspiration. He had great faith in the power of the holy name, and so he came and he's basically teaching, it's chanting and the prasadam, and eventually he found willing listeners, as and the whole thing developed, starting in 22nd Avenue. So, Bali Mahārāja passed the severe test put by the Supreme Srila Prabhupada passed the severe test put by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is further proof of the Lord's mercy toward his devotee. So this is a principle that is not easy to accept in a hedonist society like this, But when you are fortunate enough to get good association and you're receptive to the message, and especially if you take up the chanting of Hare Krishna, not maybe 16 rounds at first, but seriously every day, and you're chanting and reading and hearing and associating, then your faith, the seed of faith is planted. The faith is all important. I was going over this last night because it was in the verse about Shraddha. Krishna was saying, chapter 9, if you don't, Ashradhana Purushadharma, if you don't have faith, then you can't do anything in this path. So you may know this famous verses, 2 verses by Rupa Goswami, begins with faith. The ladder from faith to from Shraddha to Prema. Adho Shraddha to Saru Sangat Bhajana Kriya Tato Narshit Nivartisa Tato Nishta Ruchis Tata Ata Sakti Tata Bhava Tata Prema Vyujantati Sadhakana Mayam Prema Bhave Krama. Krama means step by step. So what is that faith? You don't begin with the pure faith. The preliminary faith is interest and willingness to check it out. In other words, to come into the association of devotees and to hear and even to chant and to try the chanting, you see. Chanting is very powerful. So Prabhupada had full faith in the power of the holy name. And he prayed for empowerment. Remember, he said, please make my speaking adequate so that they'll understand his philosophy. Because it's completely alien. But the amazing thing was, and this became clear, in India, he couldn't really get any, because everyone knows about Krishna already. Oh yeah, we know about Krishna. My grandmother taught me about Krishna, But they're not really. So at least at first, there wasn't any real success in India. Plus he had his godbrothers, competing. So anyway, he came to America, and it was a clear field in the sense that no one knew anything about Krishna. So it was news to a lot of people. And there's also this element of when he came and where he came. The fact that he came in the middle of the 60s, which was, and was there for the height of the hippie era, and the LSD. I never took LSD. I'm not going to tell the story. I had a little tab. I would say, should I take it? Should I not? Should I take it? Should I not? I was alone, and I said, no, I'm not going to take it. That's too crazy. But because it could, Prabhupada had to wean them off. He said, that's not going to give you God realization. But it shook people up, and it had got them interested in God. Got them interested in Indian, and then you have My Sweet Lord song and all that stuff going on. So all of that was favorable to Prabhupada being able to plant the seed. If you read the Lilamrita, there used to be 6 volumes. The second volume was planting the seed. It came out first because Satsrup Maharaj lived it. He was right there, and he could write about it firsthand. So many others, he had others, doing, investigation. So Prabhupada was able to plant the seed in fertile hearts, and then everything grew from there. But the principles are still there, is that there's always a test. Krishna's going to test you to see if you're sincere. And the test comes often, either in some serious suffering, that you undergo, or some inducement to enjoy something that you used to enjoy, but you're not supposed to. So those tests need to be passed. And then he gives you more enthusiasm and more realization when you pass them. And look, this Bali, after going through this, he's going to be exiled to Sutala, which is kind of a hellish planet. But it's not really hellish, because Vamanadeva is going to be there personally as his his doorman. And then after all of that time in Sutala, he's going to become Indra. He's going to become the Indra. Then the next Manvantara, we're in the Vaibhasvata Manvantara, then in the next one, Bali Mahārāja will be in charge. So it's an amazing story here. And there's so many lessons for us, because this is what, life in the material world needs. There's so many challenges. And you can see them as opportunities where Krishna is giving you to get stronger in devotional service and show that despite this and despite this, I'm still going to chant my rounds, I'm still going to serve, I'm still going to come to the temple, Or you can see it, why is Krishna punishing me, But that's a fallacy, because we have so many things in our background we don't even know about, and we should say, I must have done some horrible thing in the past, and now somehow or other I broke my hand or something, Okay, it's not, you'll get over it, and understand that Krishna is minimizing it, and he's just testing you, and he's giving you a chance to advance. Then it becomes, the path is much smoother. Because whatever happens, you see it, this is the material world, Krishna is testing us, we got to chant and surrender. So there's very, very good exemplary behavior here by Bali Mahārāja, and he's the acharya for tolerance, and maintaining his enthusiasm and his vows and his promises. So we can take good instruction from that. All right, that's 8:33 now. Any comments, questions, local or remote? Discussion on these very important lessons from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, Vijay Prabhu. I hope I didn't speak too fast. Those who weren't here yesterday.
No, you didn't.
Okay.
You didn't speak too fast, but the problem is that
No, don't get. Let's not get into that. Just, do you have any question or
No,
comment?
I don't have a question today.
Okay, so we'll look forward to your company tomorrow morning.
Hare
Yes,
Krishna.
Bhakti
Of
Ched.
course, I'll be here.
Bhakti Ched?
Just a quick question. I don't know if you know. Did Srila Prabhupada, before he left his body, ever visit his family? Did he ever see his family before he?
He didn't go there, but there was one, especially Vrindavandas, who was eventually initiated, who I think he would come to see him. Also, his sister came. It was famously Pishima. She was known as Pishima, and she was adored Prabhupada, and she would cook for him. And Prabhupada, when she cooked, he felt he had to eat it. He didn't want to, but she cooked very heavy spices, which was a little too much, sometimes. But anyway, she would come, and Vrindavan Das, I wasn't there when he came, but I understood he would visit. In fact, I think he was the one son who was there to see him off when he boarded the Jaladuta, although that's not there in the original writing of the Lamrita. That was revised according to what really happened.
Yeah, they asked him, I think it was Radhanath Swami, because he spoke with him about it. He said, how did you feel when you saw your father going on Jaladuta? He said, I felt proud of my father.
Just see.
But also a thing in addition to that, Srila Prabhupada, he did, like Dravida Prabhu was saying, that his son came and saw him, his sister came and saw him.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, Srila Prabhupada also set up a kind of a stipend type of thing where his family would be getting money for a certain amount of period. I don't know the details exactly, but they'd be set up pretty much for life. So he did do that as well.
Yeah,
at the end of his life.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's worth saying, but it's historical that one other, not Vrindavandas, but another son, they try to claim that Prabhupada really wasn't a sannyasi because he had all this money, he had all this power, and so forth, and so there was a claim that, and therefore they wanted to claim all the properties. His son, then it'd be a jackpot, So there was there was a legal test. There was a court case that came, and some of the devotees, of Prabhupada's godbrothers or others who knew him, especially Narayan Maharaj, he testified at this, saying that no, Srila Prabhupada was a genuine sannyasi. Even though he had all of this money at his disposal, he always used it in the service of the Lord, you see? Unlike bogus yogis who come to America, like I was reading Amala Bhakta's story about, I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's interesting. It's from 75, I think, 1975. I was working on Back to Godhead magazine, and I knew him from before. He was my first yoga teacher. And then he came to LA in 75. This was like 1970 came there, and I thought, anyway, I thought that he was coming there to try to steal our bhaktas. So I said, I know this guy from New York, But no, he had left his guru. He wanted to become a bhakta. So he came over to the office, and he told me the incredible story of how he left his guru. He lost faith, and then anyway, it's a long story. You can read it. I can give it to you. But it's, and because he saw Prabhupada wasn't a cheater. He wasn't, just trying to exploit his disciples, and living high off the, he constantly traveled. He got, he had Ambarish, with millions of dollars, and he got him the Detroit temple, which was pretty opulent at the time. And by that time, it was, Prabhupada's health was waning a little bit. It was more struggle traveling. He could have retired there, just stayed there, and no one would have said anything. But he didn't, because he'd get these letters from devotees all over the world. Please come and visit us. We haven't been. And he kept traveling until 77. So Prabhupada was obviously he was genuine. He was giving everything, and the story of how he started it and came is just so inspiring. So that's really that's the lesson here with Bali. you know, that he would keep that promise no matter what. And even if he lost everything and had to, you know, exile to hell, it doesn't matter. I kept the promise to Krishna, you know. So that's a very good example for us. Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay, Vijay.
Yes, because in the translation,
To which verse?
Text 29 through 30.
Okay.
Yes, in the translation I read that Bali Mahārāja didn't give up his good qualities as a devotee. For example, truthfulness.
Yes.
He didn't. Yes. So this part of the translation inspires me to ask the following question. Why is it that in general transcendentalists are tested? In general, people say that a true transcendentalist, you check if he is bona fide and genuine if you put him in the midst of adversity, like it's happening here with Bali Mahārāja. Why is it that only then we can see, like Srila Prabhupada, he was tested because of the winter in New York, and still he didn't give up. He didn't return to India. So why is it that in general we hear people say that for you to know that a transcendentalist is bona fide, you need to see how he acts in the midst of adversity? How would you explain that?
Yes, I think that's fairly not a difficult question. Because we see, I tried to deal with that on that little story that Prabhupada would tell about the ladies in Germany near the end of the war. Because their religion, in other words, probably most of them, if not 99%, were serious Lutherans or Christians of some kind. And what is the usual thing? I mean, even in ordinary Christianity, where you go to the Lord to pray for some benediction, and you try to get forgiven for your sins. That's an important benediction, right? As atonement. And in this way, it's you're the center. You're the center. What can God do for me? I'm going to pray ardently, you know, that I pass this test. You know, you're in college or something, you know, Christian, I don't know, whatever, you know. But that's not what Bhakti is all about. Krishna is in the center, and we're his servants. And our whole life becomes perfect when we are simply responding to Krishna's desire. This is the whole point of the Gita. That Arjuna, the last thing in the world he wanted to do was to kill or be involved in the death of Bhishma Dev and Dronacharya. But there were also so many other relatives, you know, and friends on both sides. And so he exemplified that, you know, refusing to serve the Lord because it would be devastating for my mentality. In other words, for my own sense gratification. Prabhupada says it very explicitly in many places. At first, Arjuna wanted to satisfy his own senses by not fighting. That's the whole point. And he had all kinds of Vedic reasons, you know, and said, oh, the women will be unprotected, you know, I'll be responsible. The Pitris won't be worshipped properly. But basically, it was for himself. So that's what material life is all about. And even in spiritual life, there are certain hurdles to overcome. Sometimes they're external, sometimes they're internal. You know, I can surrender to A, B, C, and D, but not E. Don't ask me to do E, you know, or don't ask me to give up E. But everyone has his own E, you know. But so that's the challenge in devotional service, is that there's no tinge of personal consideration. Prabhupada would tell that story, and I know it's getting late, I'm sorry. But famous story that Krishna had a headache. You heard that one? Krishna had a headache in Vrindavan. And
yes, I know that one, but I don't mind hearing it from you again.
So they asked Krishna, well, what can we do, you know, to relieve your headache? He said, there's only one thing they could do. The dust from the feet of my devotees, that'll cure my headache. So they went around to different devotees, and they asked, well, can you please give some dust from your your feet? I'm sorry, from your feet, that Krishna can put on his head so that it will cure his headache. What? The dust of my feet? I'll be committing a great sin, and I'll go to hell. No way, no way. This was in Vrindavan. But then they came to the gopis and they said, oh, sure, we'll go to hell. We don't mind. Take as much dust as you want. And that showed that they were ready to undergo severe suffering, for Krishna's pleasure. That's the main thing, Let me go to hell as long as I can keep serving Krishna, if that's what I have to do. And you can see that Prabhupada, coming to New York, it was like coming to hell. He got off in Boston and said, gets back on what happened was that they landed in Boston first. Prabhupada got off the boat, took a little walk, then got back on the boat and wrote that famous poem, Markani Bhagavatam, Krishna consciousness in the West. And there he prayed, why did you bring me to this horrible place? You must have a purpose, So if you want me to speak to them, then you have to make my power of speaking good, and everything like that. He's praying that for the service. He's not thinking, oh God, when can I get the trip back and go back to Vrindavan and just, chant there. No, he had taken it on. So that's the test, is that undertaking or tolerating difficulties and remaining enthusiastic in your service and faithful to Krishna's service. And that's what the gopis did. They left their, they gave up their good name, leaving at the middle of the night, and everything. And they're the best servants. And so that's the answer, Prabhu, is that there's always a test just by being in the material world. So if we accept those tests, accept those difficulties as Krishna's mercy, he's showing us how we can really prove we love him by undergoing difficulties and still continuing to serve for his pleasure. So that's the way it works. And Bali Mahārāja is a perfect example. He's not wavering. He's ready to go to hell, Sutala, whatever. And so that's the understanding. And I think Mukunda wants to say something. Is it okay, Prabhu?
Beyond okay, I must say it. You're beyond spectacular.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
That I have to reject and say that's a bit over the top, and I'll try to stay humble. Go ahead, Mukunda.
You referred to Tena Tyaktena Bunjita, and I think I might have just forgotten exactly the example you gave of the opposite of that. But I thought it was something like, you said something like, a materialist will work very hard, build up a lot of money, so much money for oneself, and then even after that, try to calculate how can I leave a bunch for my descendants and so on. And I'm wondering how I can imagine a practicing Vaishnava doing that too, and justifying it in Krishna consciousness, and I can see many ways in which I would even agree with that person, that devotee, for working very hard, accumulating a lot of money, and using that in Krishna consciousness, and then even trying to calculate how to then leave some for descendants, and then even Srila Prabhupada, the way he, as Balampur was, and I was going to point that out too, that Srila Prabhupada also made some arrangement for leaving money for his family. And so with this Tena Tyaktena Bunjita, could you say more on how a devotee is meant to calculate or calibrate their sense of this quota? And because often when we speak about that Ishopanishad verse, we speak about it in a way where it seems to contradict the way virtually every Vaishnava that I see lives in this world, the kind of quota, or the way they approach their quota. So could you say more on that? Do you think that most devotees are just not following that verse very well? Because the counterexample, the example you gave, I think is much closer to the way I see most devotees living than, yes.
Well, you're talking about like household devotees, obviously. I mean, brahmacharya is a different program.
Yes, of course, brahmacharya is, it's, I guess, mostly irrelevant, but I mean, not exactly, but mostly, that verse is still applying to grihastha devotees. So how, yes, like a
Yeah.
specifically grahast.
So,
devotees.
you know, it's. I mean, Prabhupada, you know, he laid it down often, that program, that is very hard to follow. 50% of your income, you know, should be given as a householder. You know, just the nature of the economy, it's very difficult to do that. I know in Alachua, they have a tithing program they started, you know, which is 1/10, and that's like from the Catholic Church, from the Christian Church. I'm not sure how many, you know, strictly can follow that, but it's a standard there. I mean, we had a good example, I think. I mean, you know, and I'm not saying there aren't others, but the Gaur Keshava's family, you know, I remember going there when the first time I went there, big altar dominating everything, and there were so many deities, you know, and obviously, you know, these kids are enthusiastic in Krishna consciousness, and he's, you know, strict. So, but he had to you know, leave here because for job, you know, and now he's in Seattle, and I talk to him occasionally, and he's, you know, he's doing nice. They go to the temple there and continue it. So it has to be case by case, you know, how we can live, you know, in this crazy economy like America, and be comfortable, but at the same time focus, you know, the center of the lives is still Krishna, and that, you know, that's the chanting and studying and serving in the temple if you can, whatever you can do. You know, he probably gives classes there. So it's a case-by-case affair, and some succeed more than others, you know. I'll never forget this. I used to go to Lacho all the time. I mean, twice a year. And I remember encountering one devotee, I forget his name now, but he was a close associate and friend of Gunagari Swami. I think you know, when he first joined, they were working together. I remember that. And I saw him, and he looked troubled. And I asked, because I'd seen him before, and said, "How you doing, Prabhu?" And he looked troubled. I said, "What happened? Are you okay?" He said, No, horrible. You know, what's happened? "Oh, my son stole $60,000 from me." Oh, can you imagine that? I don't know what kind of job he had or whatever, but his son had grown up, and he was, I don't know, part of the business, and he had access to the accounts, and he, you know, took the $60,000. What he was doing with that $60,000, I don't know what he was planning to do, or, you know, whatever. But this is you know, to try to live a Krishna-centered household life, which is we're meant to do if we want to go that route. It's not so easy. You know, the children grow up, and then they often are not as devoted as you had hoped. So it's difficult in the modern world. This Prabhupada set the example, you know, the general rules, but it's hard from case to case.
Maybe I should adjust my question. My question that I'm having is, now I think years ago when devotees would speak on this verse, they would give the counterexample by criticizing the millionaires. And how the millionaires, rather than just being satisfied with their quota, they seek to become millionaires, they become millionaires, and they keep making money. Nowadays, it seems like if a devotee is speaking, refers to that Ishopanishad verse, and they make a criticism of the materialists, they refer to the billionaires now. But, so maybe there aren't many Vaishnava billionaires, but there are plenty of Vaishnava millionaires. And what about the Vaishnava millionaires that we know? And do we think that because they're Vaishnavas, therefore they should keep working? Maybe that quota is in the millions, and or like we have our Kauravadi family, and do we think that when we read this mantra of Ishopanishad, do we think that we should sit down with them and, you know, have an intervention with the, you know, hey, I think you may not be satisfied with your quota. You have all this money and you keep making more. Or do we think, and if not, is it because they donate to the temple, or because maybe their quota just is a lot more, even though they're...
You know, this is a realm that I haven't really interacted with so much, and I'm trying to figure out, you know, the proper thing. It's very, all I know is it's very hard, case by case, because of course you have the example of Ambarish, multi-millionaires, but he's not only given multi-millionaires, but he's also has a tremendous credibility in speaking to wealthy Indians and everything, that they should do that because he himself has done it. You know, so he's one of the biggest fundraisers as well as fund givers. So that's a special case. But you know, not being in that position, not having had to gone through something like that, you know, I felt good when I first joined. I just emptied out my bank account. I was joining the ashram, you know, and I felt liberated. You know, it was, anyway, $1,700, but it was in 1973, so you can multiply it out, whatever. But that was the standard in that time. If you're going to be a brahmachari, boom, you know, that you're surrendering. And you had the sense from the temple and from the whole, you know, movement that it was that you could be supported, and you felt supported, you know, like that, and so it felt secure. But you know, once you want to try to do the marriage thing and then the children, and you've got to have a means of income. What's it going to be? You know, I guess the ideal is dharma setu, you know, and being able to do sacrifices for the Indians and still, you know, do service on it, which is great. I know Amoga Leela wants to do that. So I really couldn't give a informed reply about that. The ideal is there in the Shastra. Isha you understand everything belongs to Krishna, so as far as possible, use everything in his service, and you keep it minimal for the maintenance of your family life. But for each, you know, then the children and the wife are there, but you know they have needs that are that you think are beyond the minimal, and then so that, you know, it can create a lot of havoc in the family. So it's just got to pray every day to get so much nourishment from the holy name that you can live very simply and easily. All right, it's too late to go on. We need to stop. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for your attention, and we'll continue.
Just in case anyone's listening online, I know things can get taken out of context. I am not at all criticizing the Kuruvadi family. I just brought up their family as an example where I don't think anyone here is prepared to criticize them. But when we speak about that verse, we seem to indirectly criticize people who live like that. So I'm wondering how we square that, that's all. Not criticizing that devotee family.
Dharma Setu, because this floor, I don't know if there's anyone here in this room who remembers what the floor was like in 1989 when I joined. It wasn't even, and it was not so nice. Dharma Setu became the president, and he installed this floor. So I was telling him, "Oh, this is such a nice floor. Thank you for the floor." He said, "You should thank Vipin Kuruvadi for donating all the money for it." You know, so we're enjoying this longevity.